The conception around abortion is that it's only for birth control, that it's only by irresponsible women, and that the baby's life matters, or the potential baby's life matters more than the host. And we're not hosts. We're our own individual people that should be able to make decisions about our bodies. So when we found out I was pregnant, I was really excited. I remember giving Matt a bag with the pregnancy test in it, and he just squealed. He was so excited. I got it on video and everything. I remember watching that video over and over again, just getting more and more excited. I definitely thought it was going to take a lot more time to get pregnant, but then when it happened immediately, I just assumed like, oh wow, this must be meant to be. This is a great thing. We were really excited.
Everybody gets so hung up in pregnancy about boy or a girl. And they asked us that with our first, and our answer was always the same. We just want a healthy baby. Sure, it'd be great to raise a son, but it'd also be great to raise sisters. I remember with my first pregnancy, we went in at 20 weeks for the anatomy scan, but I wanted for some reason to go in as early as possible this time, and the earliest they would see me was at 18 weeks. And I also remember having a conversation with the ultrasound tech. I said, it must be hard because you're at the high-risk center. You must see a lot of complications in pregnancy, and it must be hard to deliver that news. And I'm just talking to her like, that's not going to happen to me. Like, you never think those things happen to you. So we find out it's a girl, and then she keeps doing the scan, and my husband says at this moment that she kept going back to her heart. So after taking the measurements, the tech turns and looks at me and says, I see something wrong with the heart, and I'm concerned. And I just burst into tears right away, like this big wave of, I knew it was serious and I knew something was wrong.
The doctor pointed to a little bubble that was floating next to her head and expressed that seemed like something that could be an issue. He didn't want to alarm us, so he sent us to UVA for a second opinion, where he said that their ultrasound would be more sophisticated to see in more detail what actually was on the ultrasound. I spent the whole night after that researching what it could possibly be with the small information that I had, and it wound up being nothing that I had even read about.
It was probably a good half an hour before they came back with the maternal fetal medicine specialist. She handed me this textbook printout, and she said, we think your baby has hypoplastic right heart syndrome. She explained it as a condition of the heart where the right side of the heart does not properly develop. I was asking a bunch of different questions. Where do we go from here? What kind of screening would we do in the rest of the pregnancy? What kind of follow-up? And I also asked her what our options were if we did decide to terminate the pregnancy. She said that terminating the pregnancy was an out-of-network procedure, meaning that her insurance, TRICARE, which is the insurance for the military, would not cover it. We could not have the procedure done at any military treatment facility, which all of my physicians were at military treatment facilities, and that they could not refer me where to go to seek an abortion. So I just remember it felt like being smacked in the face, that here I was in the middle of a crisis, and we had absolutely no support from our medical providers.
Oftentimes, the people we know who have sought them out are the people who have the means to do so. So the means might include health insurance. The means might include being able to put together thousands of dollars for the procedure or parts of the procedure. or having family that can help you put together that money for the procedure, that is where we can imagine the disparity is. The other disparity might be too around who has access to the healthcare to receive the diagnosis.
It wasn't until we went to CHOP, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, that we found out that it for sure was a lymphangioma and that there was really nothing that they could do. I just remember sitting there and kind of zoning out because I had just heard in my head that like my daughter was going to die. There was nothing I could do at that point. I just remember looking up at the MRI on the screen and her whole head was being overtaken by this tumor. We were in the room with the doctors for, I want to say, an hour or so, and it felt like 5 minutes. I knew that the future that she would have had if she had even made it to term wasn't a future that I wanted for her. It's really hard to hear that if you give birth to this baby and they survive, that they'll be hooked up to a machine for the first year of their life, if not longer. That she would have well over 15 surgeries. That's just something I couldn't imagine doing to an infant, to a child. If we didn't have Medicare, I don't know specifically how much the late-term abortion would have cost, but I think it would have been somewhere total around $50,000. If we had decided to continue the pregnancy and she had lived and been put on ventilators and everything, we would have been looking at, oh gosh, I don't even know, like $250,000 a year plus. People don't want to have that conversation because they don't want to feel like they're placing a value on life, but it's a reasonable conversation to have. I don't know that we could have handled the stress of having to uproot our lives and move to Philadelphia, where she would have been at the hospital 24/7 for the first year plus of her life. It's a good way to bury a couple.
Now, while we're trying to get all these second and third opinions, we're basically racing against the clock. We scheduled our appointment to go up to CHOP. At the same time, I called and scheduled my D&E in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. If we went beyond that 24 weeks, 6 days, then we run into, there's only 2 places in the country that do abortions after 24 weeks. And they're in Albuquerque and in Boulder, Colorado. And the procedure is upwards of $30,000, not including airfare and hotel to stay out there. CHOP was like our Hail Mary. We're going to go in there. These are world-renowned physicians. They're either going to tell us that they can help our baby, or we're going to get confirmation that this is pretty much as severe as it gets. Again, they told us that there was no surgery, no medicine, nothing they could do to fix or make the baby's heart better. She was essentially going into heart failure inside of me. And at that point, as you know, this was maybe our 4th follow-up since the initial diagnosis, we knew that things were getting worse, and that's why we had scheduled our D&E for, the days after being at CHOP. And we were just hoping, like holding on to that little chance of hope that maybe we'd go in there and there would be something they could do and we wouldn't have to go through with the D&E. We could just call and cancel that appointment. But, as it was, the physicians all confirmed that our baby was only getting sicker and that her quality of life outside of my womb was little to nothing.
Any kind of aberrant event can be experienced as trauma. So certainly any kind of pregnancy loss can be experienced by someone as trauma. Absolutely terminating for medical reasons is a trauma. It is a trauma to be in a situation where you have to, as some people say, play God. They have to make that choice. It is traumatic to give birth not in the way that you are expecting to do so. That trauma can come back up for somebody, certainly in a subsequent pregnancy, which is what I see very commonly. There can be trauma in terms of what happens for that person in terms of how their family might be completed, what their reproductive journey ends up being, what that story ends up being. So that too can be traumatic.
I remember looking around and just realizing that there were people there ending unintended pregnancies. And I remember thinking that it wasn't fair. Like, I very much wanted this baby, and it wasn't out of judgment of what they were going through, but it was just like, why couldn't their baby be sick? They're not, going to have this baby.
I didn't want to end her heartbeat before I could deliver her. I wanted to be able to hold her while she was still breathing and feel like I had some sort of connection with her. But after talking to the doctor and hearing how traumatizing that would be for the baby, how painful it would be, because she would literally die in my arms if I did that, we decided to trust the doctor and end her heartbeat before. I felt like that was the most humane way to say goodbye to her. It was the least painful way for her to go. It was probably the most traumatizing part of it for me personally.
The D&E is a 2-day procedure. On day 1, they insert laminaria. They also inserted a shot of digoxin, and they insert that into the uterus. And the digoxin is what they use to stop the fetus's heartbeat. I remember holding on to my husband. His face was just right next to mine. He couldn't look at the shot and I couldn't either. So we were both like turned away with our faces right next to each other. And we were just crying, sobbing as they inserted the shot into my uterus.
It's a very intimate, scary process. Matt was there the whole time. He held my hand through it all. I remember when they said, it's done, she's gone, and I didn't feel any movement inside of me anymore, and that was the hardest part, I think. My husband said the sound of her coming woke him up. It sounded like someone had popped a balloon. So he was immediately at my side. I remember being completely out of it when they handed her to me, and she was really tiny and purple. I just held her and cried. And they took her and they cleaned her up, and a nurse dressed her in a hat and a little gown. They brought her back and we held her for about an hour or so. But because she wasn't fully formed, her skin had already started to decompose, and she was really fragile. So they took her, and then we didn't see her again until she was in her casket.
People come to grief differently. So we come to grief with whatever experiences we've had prior to an abortion. It is a loss of a prospective future. It is a loss of possibilities. And that's a much harder loss to mourn communally. People might empathize, they might be there, they might try to understand. But there's not that community of other people who knew the baby. And that's what makes it really challenging. And even the loss tends to get felt more by the person who was pregnant because they had more experience with that baby, finding out about the pregnancy, sharing news about the pregnancy. If the pregnancy had gotten far along enough to feel movement, feeling that movement, again, all of the dreams and the preparation that might have occurred during that pregnancy time.
The way that someone described it to me best is grief comes in waves. And that is so true. There are days where I feel like nothing happened, and I feel completely normal. And then there are days where, it's more than 3 years out and I can still get knocked back down and not want to get out of bed. It took me 3 years to see a grief counselor. I thought that I had it all under control. I went back to work about 3 months after it happened, and I felt okay. I felt, like I'd gone through something, but, this is life and I'm back in it. But I think what I've learned through going to therapy is that I probably will be grieving forever. It's not really something that I think you can get over as the loss of a child.
I can't tell you how many people, when they heard Donald Trump say in the State of the Union and talk about abortion in the graphic ways that he did, were traumatized, re-traumatized listening to it. So it's not just healing from grief, but it's also having to heal from the trauma of it and making sense of the trauma of it and being able to process the trauma, which we have not just as a thought, not just as emotions, but also viscerally in our cells and our bodies. So processing the trauma in all three kinds of ways is so important, as well as processing the grief.
Trump really mischaracterized it by saying that it was ripping the babies out at 9 months, and that just sent me into this deep panic attack. I felt so sickened that this man who was running to be the leader of our nation was up there blatantly saying all of these lies about something that was so like essential to something that my husband and I had experienced and our family had experienced, and I really hated feeling lied about.
So this is not the situation anyone wants to find themselves in. These are not people who it was inconvenient now to be pregnant or they changed their mind. These are people that I know who learned about some really serious brain malformations that hadn't been able to be seen in that 20-week ultrasound. Nobody is advocating for the idea that living babies that are full term, that are healthy, should be killed. That's called infanticide. Nobody is advocating for that. Where we think it's really important, where at least I think it's really important, is specifically in the case where people have either a health issue that could threaten the person carrying the pregnancy's life, or a fetal anomaly that can threaten the baby's life. So that's a lot to consider. No state in this country would allow a termination for a healthy baby after 28 weeks anyway. So it's a moot point and it's a false argument that gets made.
She was sick. It wasn't a matter of if she was going to die, but when and how. And I decided to have her life end in the most peaceful way possible. The last thing she felt was the warmth of her mother's womb, the safest, most comfortable place for a fetus to be. She wasn't choking, suffocating, having a heart attack. And I always say that in order to make her heart whole, we had to forever lose a piece of ours and let her go peacefully.